Among the first American flyers to make it to the front was Edward V. Rickenbacker, a man of remarkable resourcefulness who would go on to become America's ace of aces. Born in 1890 in Columbus, Ohio, the third of 8 children, Eddie Rickenbacker grew up in the American heartland at a time when the miracle of modern invention seemed to offer limitless opportunities for an industrious young man. When his father was killed in an accident, Eddie, all of 13 years old, left school for good and began working in a glass foundry. Working 6 12-hour shifts each week contributed $3.50 to the family fund. Rickenbacker's climb up the ladder next found him working for the Buckeye Steel Casting Company, now 14 years old and earning the princely sum of $1 each day. Next followed a job carving cemetery monuments that paid 50 cents more per day. After 3 months of breathing stone dust, Eddie took a job working in a machine shop for the Pennsylvania Railroad. It was here that the teen discovered his love for machines, and before long had secured a position in a garage, servicing a recent invention called the automobile. The mechanic's job was a slight step backwards in pay, but young Eddie quickly became expert in the care of these new machines, and was soon working for the Freyer Miller Company, a firm that was engaged in building racing automobiles. Before long, Rickenbacker basically knew all there was to know about gasoline-powered automobiles, and eventually became involved in their design. Next came a mechanic's job with the Duesenberg racing team, and finally as a race driver himself for that company. Over the next several years, Eddie Rickenbacker was to make a name for himself as one of the Duesenberg drivers, racing on all the famous tracks around the country, including the Indianapolis Speedway, and winning his share of races. At the end of 1916, Rickenbacker sailed to England as a representative of the Sunbeam Motor Company, with the intention of developing an English racing team. In England, the Germanic nature of his family name was cause for concern with the British authorities, and he found himself constantly followed by British agents throughout his stay. Eddie Rickenbacker was no spy though, and on this first trip abroad, he was to become enamored to the British cause. Immediately upon his return to the United States, he began preaching what he called the 3 M's for the Allied war effort: money, munitions, and men. A year later, Rickenbacker again sailed for Europe, this time landing in France, where he was commissioned a sergeant in the American Expeditionary Force and given the job of chauffeuring staff officers around. His ability to repair motors in the field landed him the job as Colonel William Billy Mitchell's personal driver, and it was here that Eddie Rickenbacker became acquainted with the fledgling American Air Service. Colonel Mitchell, the great American military air pioneer, eventually secured Rickenbacker's transfer to the big flying school at Issoudun. At the age of 28, Rickenbacker was considerably older than his classmates, but his success at auto racing had demonstrated that he possessed fast reflexes and a keen eye. The first 2 American units to become operational were the 94th and 95th Pursuit Aero Squadrons, which set up shop at Villeneuve in early March as part of the U.S. 1st Pursuit Group. Raoul Lufberry had managed to get himself attached to the 94th, but not as the squadron leader, which suited him fine, as his time at Issoudun had made it painfully clear how much he disliked the extra paperwork that accompanied the job. Instead, the squadron was to be commanded by Major John Huffer, a French-born American who'd been serving in French squadrons on the Italian front. Besides Lufberry, other Lafayette alumni who found themselves assigned to the 94th included James Norman Hall, Bill Loomis of Bedford, Massachusetts, and Alan Winslow, a native of Forest Park, Illinois. Eddie Rickenbacker, fresh from the flying school, also reported to the 94th towards the end of March. For aircraft, the 2 new American squadrons had been given Newport 28s, a fairly modern design, but considered a cast-off by the French units, who'd preferred the newer Spad 13s. The Newport was a plane with good performance characteristics, being fast and nimble, but suffered the unsavory habit of shedding its wing covering in a long dive. France had allotted nearly 300 of these fighters to the U.S. Air Service, and although the first units were deemed operational by mid-March, it wouldn't be for several weeks until the machine guns arrived to arm the airplanes. For the time being, the American squadrons went aloft and familiarized themselves with the area while they awaited their guns. For a squadron emblem, Major Huffer suggested a hat and a ring, a traditional challenge to a fight. and the 94th was henceforth known as Uncle Sam's Hat-in-the-Ring Squadron. By the middle of April, the squadron was fully operational, and on the 14th, Douglas Campbell had the honor of scoring the first American victory of the war. Campbell, a native of San Francisco, had abandoned his studies at Harvard upon America's declaration of war and had been one of the first cadets to enroll in the expanding air service. Within minutes of Campbell's first victory, a second German plane fell to American guns, this time to the victorious Allen Winslow. American journalists descended on the airfield at Villeneuve to report on the accomplishment, and the exploits of their nation's double kill was splashed across headline banners of every major American newspaper. The United States had finally entered the arena of the Great War in the air.